Hi again, Risa here, back with another episode of Ask Risa. This is my fortnightly video series where I discuss some common wedding planning questions and problems that you might be having if you're trying to plan your own wedding. Coming to you still in lockdown here in California due to COVID-19, but I am still just trying to provide information that you're gonna need when we're all finally allowed to have weddings again. So this week I am talking about your wedding guest book and some different options that you can use to record who comes to your wedding. So a wedding guest book obviously is exactly what it sounds like. It's a book that your guests sign, and they usually write a little note, wishing you well or something like that on your wedding day. And it's just a nice thing for you to have to look back on so you can remember who was at your wedding, and they write you fun little notes. So it's just a cool thing to have. Some people do still use actual books to do this, and on Etsy you can find a million of them. You can pretty much everything I'm going to talk about today you can find on Etsy. It is a treasure trove of stuff for your wedding. You can get books that have like wood covers that have been laser cut or engraved. You can get acrylic covers, normal covers. You can have your monogram, your names, your initials, your wedding date, like whatever you want, you can put on the cover of your book, and it can match your wedding theme as much or as little as you want it to. So aside from books, there are also a lot of other options that you have when it comes to having something for your guests to sign. One of the reasons I recommend that you have an engagement photo session is that you can use the engagement photos at your wedding as your guest book. So there's a few different ways that you can put your engagement photos to use. One is to do what I actually did. That is, you choose a few of your favorites. You have them professionally printed, so you've got high quality photos on good quality paper. Don't just print them at Target or something like that. Get professional prints. Then take them to a custom framing shop and have them lay out the photos in the way that you want them. We used 5 photos for ours, and they will custom mat the photos for you. And so you leave plenty of mat around and in between the photos, and then you take that to your wedding and your guests can sign right on the mat. And then after your wedding, you take it back to the frame shop and you have them frame it and put it under glass. And then you can hang it on your wall, which is what we did. So I look at it all the time. Option number 2 is just choose one of your favorite engagement photos and have it blown up really big, like poster size, either like 18 by 24 or 24 by 36, depending on how many guests you have, because then you have your guests actually sign right on the photo. So if you have a lot of guests, you need a larger photo, obviously. And then afterwards, you can either just hang it up as it is, you can have it dry mounted and hang it up frameless, or you can have it framed and put under glass and hang it on your wall. Or you can do the same thing and have it framed and put under glass before your wedding, and then get special markers that write on glass and have all your guests sign the actual glass. So the photo's underneath all the signatures, but they're not actually signing on the photo itself. And then option number 4 for using photos is to just print a book. Like you can use Shutterfly or, whatever, any other online photo book service you want. Make a book, just make sure that you leave plenty of white space on the pages, and then people will sign right there in the book. So then you have a nice little photo album that also serves as your guest book. So those are 4 ways to use your engagement photos as your guest book. But there are a bunch of other options as well. And everything I'm about to mention, I have seen in practice either at friends' weddings or at my clients' weddings. So these are all really cool ideas. I like them all, which is why I included them. And again, pretty much all of these I think you can find on Etsy or, at least with a Google search. So something that's become really popular lately is they're little tiny wooden hearts, like tiny. They're only like this big. And then there's a box that has a slot in the top and the front is glass, and it's a skinny box. People sign the heart and then they drop it in the box, and then you can see the hearts and all the things that are written on them showing through the glass. And you can have your names and wedding date embossed on the glass as well. So I've had multiple clients do that, and it's a fun little approach. The only downside to that is that the hearts are so little, there's not a lot of room to really write anything other than names or like best wishes or congrats and then your name. You don't get a lot of space for writing, so that's something to keep in mind. I also had a client do a wooden puzzle in the shape of a heart, and then people signed the individual pieces. So it was big. It was, reasonably sized puzzle, and then the pieces fit together to form a heart, and everybody signed an individual piece. Also, I had a friend do Jenga blocks. Basically, we all signed a piece of wood that was used as a Jenga game, so that was kind of cool. I had a client once do the movie Up themed print. So the print had the house, and it had all the strings for the balloons, from Up that caused the house to rise, and it had the couple's name and their wedding date. And then we had ink pads, and the guests would put their thumb in the ink pad and then push their thumbprint to the top of one of the balloon strings. And so all of the guests' thumbprints became the balloons that were holding up the house, which was super cool and very cute. But I will warn you, we had a little bit of a problem with people taking the lids off the ink pads and putting them down on the print. And so there were ink smudges at the end of the wedding. I don't know what the couple did to get those out. I'm not 100% sure, but if you're gonna do that, I would recommend assigning a person to literally stand at the guest book table and oversee that process, because people make a mess if you give them too many opportunities. So, but it was really cute when it was all said and done. An atlas or a world map. I've had multiple clients do something similar to this. If you are really into traveling, and then you have all your guests sign either where they're from, I had one couple do that, or where they think you should go for vacation. So like I would sign Paris or something. I would sign on France and tell them that they should visit Paris and see the Eiffel Tower or something like that. So that's fun if you are into traveling, or if you have guests coming from all over the place, then they can sign where they have come from. That's fun too. I had some clients last year who had a butterfly themed wedding, sort of. So we bought a bunch of paper butterflies on Etsy. They were about this big. We got them in white and black. And then the guests signed the butterflies, and then the butterflies like folded. And so they had a spine, and they were designed to be glued onto a board basically, and then hung up on the wall. And so you have this 3D wall hanging with your guest book with all the butterfly wings like flapping. Super cool. Got it all on Etsy. I had clients use a vintage typewriter last year, and all the guests typed them notes on the typewriter. So that was fun. But just make sure somebody knows how to work a typewriter, because I had to rethread the ribbon on the typewriter. It got dislodged during transit, but I knew how to do that, thankfully. Something else that's super important, popular lately, is those Instax Polaroid cameras. I don't even know how many clients I've had use these things. They're so popular. They're instant Polaroid cameras. People take a couple different approaches with these, so it's really important that you have instructions for your guests to follow so that they know what you want them to do. I've had couples who wanted people to take a selfie with the camera, write a message on the front, because there's a little bit at the bottom where there's the white space at the bottom of the picture where you can write something, and then tape it into a book. I've had clients who wanted them to take a selfie, write on either the front or the back. The back is black, so you would need like white or metallic pens for that. And then hang it up we had like a wooden frame with wires strung across the frame and little tiny clothespins. And then you like clip the photo to the clothespin, and then they're all displayed. I've also had clients who wanted guests to take the same photo twice. Essentially, they take a selfie for themselves to keep, and then they take the same photo and they leave it behind for the couple getting married. So again, just explain to your guests what you want them to do with the cameras and make sure you have all the supplies, you know, tape, pens, the rack to hang them up, the little clippy things, whatever you want them to do, just make sure you have all the supplies there. A barrel end. This was something that my friends who are from Kentucky did. They got the round end of a bourbon barrel, and we all signed that as their guest book. You could do it with a wine barrel, or, I mean, really any barrel or circular piece of wood. It doesn't have to officially be a barrel end, but that's kind of cool. Also in the wood family, you can do a large sign that has either like your names or your new last name or just your initial and your wedding date, and then everybody would sign the board. I've never had a client do this, but I've seen it on Etsy. You can get a large wooden letter. So like my last name, my husband and my last name is Enyon, so we'd have a big E, and everybody signs the E or whatever letter your name starts with. So I have never had a client do that, but it seems kind of cool. I did have clients do an illustration once. The bride was from California, the groom was from Minnesota. And so there's a place on Etsy, of course, where you can order a print, and it had Minnesota and California like overlapped on each other. And then there's a heart in the middle that kind of shows like where they got married, which was Sacramento. So you can do that with any two states. If you're both from the same state, you can get a print of just the state that you're from. I've seen lots of places on Etsy that do illustrations of the couple. So there was one that I saw that was the couple with their dog. It was an illustration in the center, and then the guests signed all around it, which is really cute. If you have a really interesting venue, you could have an illustration of the venue as your guest book with, you know, your names and date on it, and it just makes really cool wall art when you're done. So those are all of the possibilities that I could think of and that I have seen and that I have loved. I do have a few tips for you, just general tips related to the guest book. Make sure when you're buying pens that they are labeled either archival or acid-free, because that means the ink will not degrade over time. You can't just use regular pens. And if you're doing something like writing on glass or writing on the back or the front of a Polaroid photo, you're gonna want special pens. You might need white pens, you might need metallic pens. Just make sure that you don't buy pens until you know for sure what you're doing with your guest book. Also, have something to keep the pens in, either a little jar or, you know, a pencil caddy, something that you can put on the table next to the guest book, because they tend to roll off the table and fall either into the grass or onto the floor. Then they roll under the table and they're hard to find. So having something to corral them is helpful. Also, make sure you buy extras, because people will walk off with the pens without even thinking about it. So you want at least 4 pens, maybe even up to a dozen if you have a big wedding. And that's something that I try to check on throughout the day to make sure that the pens haven't all wandered off. And I usually keep a few stashed underneath the table. That way, if they all disappear, I still have a few extras in reserve that I can pull out. Placement of your guest book, you want to have it placed near the entrance, whether that's inside a building or outside if you're sort of having an outdoor ceremony and guests are just walking up to the venue. You want to have your guest book near the entrance so that people can sign it as they come in. It's a good way to get that out of the way before things really get going. And then what I always do is move it during the ceremony when everybody's off paying attention to the ceremony. I will move the guest book to wherever the cocktail hour is going to be. That way, anyone who either arrived in a hurry or just forgot to sign the guest book has a chance to sign it during cocktail hour. I usually, depending on the circumstances, sometimes I will leave the book out during dinner and dancing, but if we're outside and the weather is starting to cool off or the humidity is rising or something like that, a lot of times I will take the guest book and I will put it inside somewhere, or I will wrap it up and put it back in its box, because high humidity can damage some materials, especially photos or paper or something like that. So that's something to think about. And If you don't have a wedding planner or coordinator, you might want to assign someone to be on guest book watch so they can put it away. And on that note, when you bring your guest book to the wedding venue, bring it in its original packaging, like all the packing material and protective material, bring that with you. And that way, whoever you put on guest book duty or your planner or coordinator can just put it right back in that box and wrap it back up, and it'll be safe and secure and, ready for transport. And then lastly, when you frame, if you're getting something framed and you're having it framed under glass, talk to the frame shop. Most of them will suggest this, but you want to make sure that you frame it under UV filtering glass, because that way the sun won't damage the photos or the ink that you're framing under glass. And it goes for anything, whether it's a book or whatever. Don't display it in your house in a place that gets sunlight regularly throughout the day, because it's gonna do damage or fade your guest book. So you want to keep it protected, keep it out of the sun, and get UV filtering glass if you're framing something under glass. All right, so those were all of my ideas for what to do about a guest book that's not a book. And if you think of anything else, let me know. Leave it in the comments. I would love to hear any further ideas. And that's it. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another video. Hope everybody is staying safe and staying home as much as possible, regardless of where you live. All right, bye for now.